Today, we're going to take a trip back in time to a time before the lore. When He Man and the Masters of the Universe first came out in the early 80s, the lore was pretty basic. It was pretty much you had He Man, you had Skeletor, and they battled it out. The toys came with little mini comics to help little kids figure out the stories that they wanted to tell, but they were pretty bare boned. They, over time, got more interesting, a lot more interesting, and this interesting book actually has them all in there, including the original ones. So today we were going to explore like the original lore, sort of before the lore, before filmation, before the cartoon, and definitely way before the exciting movie that's coming out this summer. So He-Man is our main star, good guy, hero. Skeletor is the villain, and Castle Grayskull is the fortress of mystery and power, and they would battle over control of the castle. And one of the fun like play features that came with the toys is that He-Man came with half of a power sword. He came with the good half, and Skeletor came with the bad half. And when you would get them and you would like snap them together into one sword, then it became the key for to Castle Grayskull. It like literally, you would stick it in the little keyhole, and then that would allow you to open up the castle. And that was a lot of fun for little girls and boys. And I thought it was a little weird at first though when I first got the sword, because I was like, oh, there's something wrong. It's like broken, because it seemed like it was only half a sword, and it kind of looked like a cool sword on the front, but then like on the back it kind of looked like a Lego. But I guess that was so that you could snap it together. One little added fun play feature that Castle Grayskull had were these flags that came with it, and the flags had the good guy side and the bad guy side. And so, depending on who was in control of Castle Grayskull, like whether it was He Man or Skeletor, they could fly their flag and let everybody know. So, beyond the basic good guy, bad guy, and the setting, there was a whole array of backup friends, good guys and bad guys. Okay, so here's the first round of characters that came out for He Man and the Master of the Universe. Like we said, obviously, there's He Man, our strong barbarian, and Skeletor, the Lord of Destruction, and they were arch enemies. The next really important good guy that I want to talk about is the Green Goddess. So the Green Goddess was like sort of like Mother Nature. She like lived in the woods, and she was in charge of like He-Man's magical weapons, and she was kind of like his dresser. She would get him all suited up, and so she gave him swords and shields and his armor, and made him into a svelte, well-dressed warrior ready to take on Skeletor and not just be a barbaric barbarian. And I thought it was kind of interesting that in Progressive that they made a female character who was actually debatably more powerful than He-Man, because she was sort of his protector. Um, so to balance out the strong female lead, there was also the quintessential damsel in distress, Teela. Now, don't get me wrong, Teela went on to be quite a strong heroic role model for young girls. But in the original sort of mini comics, it kind of was she had her weak moments where she served as the damsel in distress for little boys to like imagine saving a princess from perils. And so the really interesting thing about the Tila dolls is that they look exactly the same, and they're the same mold and everything. And there was some lore also about like how one is like the clone of the other, or maybe her daughter, and we'll get into that more another time. There's a lot to talk about with Tila. But the thing that's really fun about Mattel's marketing or and selling of her was that they only sold her as one doll. So she just came with a change of outfit. She had her little snake armor, and you just changed her outfit, and then she became someone else. So with her little snake hood on, she was the goddess. And then when you would take the snake off, then she was Tila. And so Tila often was like a plot device to be the damsel in distress. And she would like catch Skeletor's eye and he would want her to be his bride. And so then he would like send Beastman out to go and get her. And then there was often like a lot of like manhandling and stuff of Tila, which was always like funny and ridiculous. So let's talk about the villains. So we had Skeletor, Lord of Destruction, and then his backup was Beastman. That was his main guy, and he also had Merman, Beastman and Merman. And then originally, I mean, I think hopefully their titles say it all. That Beastman was like Lord of Beasts, and Merman was like Lord of the Sea, and they were evil. And then they had this other character, Stratos. And Stratos is really interesting because in the very first early depictions, he was actually depicted as a bad guy. So that you kind of had like Skeletor's warriors by air and by sea and by land, and they kind of could like take over and battle for control together. But that changed very quickly. Like very quickly, Stratos went on to become just a good guy and one of He-Man's best friends. And he also, it seemed very like Hawkmanish or very like Hawk from Buck Rogers. It was kind of almost that same era and always kind of reminded me of that. So the other really important good guy to talk about is Man-at-Arms, the other He-Man character. And he was uh, He-Man's best friend, and he had like master of weapons, and he was just kind of another cool guy. The cool green bodysuit and like futuristic helmet to kind of show that like their world was somewhere between sword and sorcery and like sci-fi, blending all kinds of genres. Very cool stuff. So then we had this other character, Zodak, and Zodak also is kind of interesting and um, unclear as to like his role in their universe because was he like a bad guy or a good guy, and they kind of like showed him both forms in the cross sell. So like the marketing, the back of the packaging had like pictures of other toys that little kids could pester their parents to buy for them. And if Mattel like didn't have a good balance of good guys and bad guys, so they're like, oh, he's a bad guy or he's a good guy, just to keep the balance in check. The one thing that's really funny about Zodak being a bad guy is that he has webbed feet. And apparently that was a thing where bad guys had webbed feet, and then the good guys just had regular furry boots on. Wear. So Zodak was sort of ambivalent in his narrative, and he would just they called him the cosmic enforcer. So he was like from another dimension or outer space or something like that, and he would like get in his chair and just sort of fly around and like watch the goings ons. Later in the lore, it kind of leaned more towards him being a good guy. But we will talk more about the later lore later. For today, it's that original lore with the original cast of characters. And our last one to talk about is our good friend, Battle Cat. So Battle Cat is like super awesome. He's like the steed for He-Man to ride around on. And it's he was actually a leftover mold from Mattel from the Big Jim line, which was like action toy for boys that was like Ken. He was Ken sized, Barbie and Ken sized, and so the lion figure for Big Jim made sense because he was like Ken sized. But then Mattel was like, yeah, we're just going to use it for He-Man too, and he's just about the right size for He-Man to ride around and have adventures on. And we love Battle Cat. Okay, so that was the basic intro to the basic first run of characters. And then after the success of those characters, Mattel was like, we're going to lean in and we're going to have a franchise. And we're going to work with Filmation Studios to make a cartoon, which went on to become really popular in the 80s. And as we now know, there's this exciting movie coming out this summer. But they thought, well, before we do that, we need to world build, we need to character develop, we need to really expand the narrative story, make more play sets, make more vehicles, make more money. So they went back to the think tank and they wanted to come up with some more ideas. And they sure did. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode where we'll explore all of the Motu basics.
Subscribe.